Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses!
Hello and welcome to this week's RTÉ GAA Podcast. We are carrying on with our look at the All-Star team of the Sunday game era, and I'm delighted to say we're looking at full-backs, but we haven't a full-back among us. Today we are joined by Pat Spillane, Kerry legend and Sunday game pundit, Michael Murphy, sometime Donegal full forward, sometime Donegal midfielder, and he says himself he's slipping further and further back. But he's with us today because he has an expertise in being marked by at least one full-back for at least some of every game he plays in. And we also have Rory O'Neill, series producer of the Sunday game. How are you all doing, lads?
Good.
Good. So listen, we'll crack on with the chat now in a second, but as with all of these, I will want to give you the top 10 in our poll for the full-backs of the Sunday game era. The public have voted on the RTÉ website and the News Now app, and the top 10 is as follows. Sorry, I haven't got the Top of the Pops music today. You can hum it in your heads. At 10, we have Neil Mckee, teammate of your own Michael. Then we have John Okeefe of Kerry. Then we have Mark O'Connell of Meath, Tony Scullion of Derry, Darren Fay of Meath, Mick Lyons of Meath, Keith Higgins of Mayo, and the top 3 and the full back line on the Sunday game full back line of, the All-Star team of the Sunday game era. The full back line is Seamus Moynihan, Paddy O'Shea, and his nephew, Mark O'Shea. So, Pat, you can see why we have you on here, because you're probably the only pundit we have who could discuss this top 3 without having to speak through gritted teeth. What do you make of that selection?
Well, I'll tell you this, look, trying to choose a team of the decade or a player of the decade or a man of the match, it's very subjective. It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. And here you're talking over 4 decades, different standards over years, different styles of play, different tactics. And I mean, nowhere, we're talking about the full back line, and I'd say we know about the evolution of the game over the 40 years, but nowhere has a game evolved than with the full backs, because you take, in particular, cornerbacks. I mean, the cornerback 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years, in general, I generalise, was slow, was probably the least skillful player. His basic job was as a stopper, as a blocker, keep his man from scoring. Pace, fitness, comfortable on the ball, not really. Whereas the modern day fullback is fit, is pacey, is comfortable on the ball, can score, whatever like that. So, right, we'll park that. So things have changed. I think it was John B. Keane. I'll tell you this. John B. Keane was once asked, what was the most dangerous animal in the world? And he said the most dangerous animal in the world was a junior football cornerback, about 40 years of age, with varicose veins. So look, we've moved on. Anyway. We've moved on. Right. So what do I think of that? I first of all have a slight problem with the nominees, because I know Paddy has won more All-Stars as in the full back line than in the half back line, but Paddy was a wing back now. So let's park that now. I don't. Paddy O'Shea was a wing back. He was not a cornerback. So I don't agree with that. Look, for what it's worth, it's
Mark is a no-brainer, though, Pat. I would imagine Mark is a no-brainer.
I'll tell you very quickly. It's first of all going to be unique, because this is going to be the only line on our, when the team is finally selected. This is going to be the only line that will not have a Dublin player. That is a certainty, and that stands out from that. My opinion, the greatest fullback of all time, John Okeefe by a country mile. Absolutely.
I was a bit surprised, actually, Pat, that he was so low down in the list. I mean, I know I would have seen him, we'll say, more coming towards the tail end of his career, but he was a colossus on the edge of that square, and just the archetypal fullback, amazing player.
John Okeefe was a fullback. I mean, John Okeefe could have played fullback in any era. John Okeefe could comfortably. He was the fittest guy. He was unbelievable athlete. I mean, he had a body like before strength and conditioning was ever heard of. Jono was one of the first of the PE teachers playing inter-county football. Jono studied PE in Loughborough College. So Jono was ahead of the curve in terms of fitness and looking after his body. Oh, do you know when you talk about your body as a tipple? Jono, and still has to this day, oh, what a specimen, man. 6'2", 6'3", muscle. He had pace, he had fitness, great reader of the game, won an all-star centre field, won all-stars at fullback. Look, by a country mile. But of course, the problem is that it was only, like, his best days were probably 75, 70, towards 79, 80. He was coming towards the, but fullback, miles ahead of everyone else.
The one thing you'd look at on that, the three that have been selected by the public, not by us, who put that up, Mark O'Shea, Paul Dursay, Seamus Moynihan, even Mark, who, as we say, is the absolute archetype cornerback. He also started his inter-county career at wing-back, didn't he? So you could argue that all three are Kerry men who started out in the half-back line and kind of finished up. So you could say, perhaps, Michael, that it's the kind of they were wise heads, they were experienced players, they knew how to play the game, and you're a man who's familiar with this, having to play in a number of positions. They probably had great football intelligence when they were going into that full back line.
Yeah, it's one of the main things that you would say about any of the fullbacks, or any of the fullbacks that I would come up against, or any of the fullbacks that we've mentioned out in this list so far, is they're really, really intelligent and they're versatile. And if you look at the modern day game that we were playing, I don't like to bring it back to it, but any of those past players that we were named out there, John Okeefe, I'm sure you mentioned there, Pat, who I mightn't have seen too much of, he would slot into today's game absolutely no bother. They're intelligent and they're versatile. They're physically well able, and they're very, very good ball players. Mark O'Shea, he probably epitomizes quite a lot of what I would look at growing up as a full forward, of who you potentially would come up against, and you look at him as this lovely, silky type of footballer who's really, really comfortable on the ball. And again, I go back to a story I went down in 2011 or 2012 in Clarny. Donegal team with Jim McGuinness, and we went down in a league game down to Clarny and to the edge of the square down there, and Mark O'Shea picked me up. So with a lovely shake of the hands, and I said, "Just beautiful, beautiful setting, beautiful scenery, lovely day out here. We're beginning to come close to championship." And I thought it'd be a really nice, clean game here with Mark O'Shea. One of your
God bless your innocence.
One of your heroes coming up. Just let's say the first 10 minutes were interesting. We'll put it that way. But took me to the absolute cleaners, both on the ground playing football, but a real strong physicality, mental toughness to basically take you out of the game that day and get the better of you,
Yeah, to me, and probably to Rory, the standard we play football at, my idea of a cornerback is sticky as hell, stubborn, malevolent, and will get a nosebleed if he goes beyond the 45-yard line. Pat, is there any truth in that at inter-county level, or are you kind of talking everybody's a footballer now, or is there still a place in the game for a guy who, for example, we had Jackie Tyrrell on the hurling version of this last week, and he was talking about how in an All-Ireland final, he remembers he touched the ball twice. It's not his job to touch the ball, it's his job to make sure man touches.
I think Michael Murphy can confirm. I'm nearly certain, off the top of my head, was it 2000 and was it 90? Matt Gallagher.
92, Matt Gallagher.
92. He didn't
got
touch the
man
ball
of the
at all,
match.
did he?
How many times did he touch the ball?
It was he never kicked the ball, actually.
He never kicked the ball. And he got man of the match. Yeah. Actually, Mikey, getting back to two things. I mean, and exactly what Michael talked about intelligence. I mean, the great player, the good player, the brilliant player can play any position. And, carry down through the years, going back 70 years ago or 60 years ago, and you had the great traditional Kerry fullbacks of Ned Roach and Joe Cohan and these boys. And then you had John Okeefe, and all the top fullbacks from John O'Keefe's time on have all been converted from either midfielders or half-back line. So you had John Okeefe, converted midfielder, Sean Walsh, converted midfielder to fullback, Seamus Moynihan, one of the most intelligent players of all time. I mean, Seamus's best position always was a half-back, converted to fullback. Mike McCarthy the same. Even I know at the moment with Kerry, our club mate here, Tig Morley, plays fullback. It's not his natural position. He started as a forward. He's more a halfback. But, good players can read the game, they're intelligent. But one of the difficulties nowadays, when you talk about defenders and assessing their worth, is bear in mind for the last 20 years, approximately, with the defensive systems in place, whether it be a sweeper or the blanket defence, defenders have got a lot more protection. So what has been lost in that is the man-to-man defender. I can see it in Kerry. We have very good players as defenders in Kerry. They're very comfortable on the ball. They're very pacey. They're very skillful. On the back foot, man-to-man defending, they're not great. So we have lost that art in the last 20 years of man-to-man defending, keeping your man scoreless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, just to say, I couldn't help but notice the prevalence of Meath men. Mick Lyons, Darren Fay, Martin O'Connell, and there's a few more not too far outside. They are kind of the epitome, I think, to a lot of us of what you said there, the man-on-man defender. And so we try to share a little bit of video here. I hope you can all see this, but obviously this is sporting violence. But I just wanted to, for people who maybe aren't familiar with this from the 1990 All-Ireland final, Rory will wince at this moment, but enjoy the memory overall.
I remember it well.
Pick up off the ground by Colin O'Neill.
Oof.
Oh, jeez.
As we all know.
In the days before cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw the line, but your men still prevailed.
He didn't even wince. Like to be honest, I remember that very, very distinctly, because that was a fairly big year in terms of the history of Cork GAA anyway, certainly. And I thought once he was gone, I thought that was it. Fairness, to be fair to that Cork team, I'd say that's probably their crowning glory. As bad an All-Ireland final and all as it was, I think it finished 11 points to 9. But to actually beat Meath with 14 men, I thought showed a lot of balls.
Yeah.
Actually, Mikey, getting back to the Meath, and you talked about you talk about the traditional Meath defender, and you think of Mick Lyons, and you think of Liam Hargan, and you think of Colm Kyle, and by Jesus, they didn't take prisoners. They were tough. But Martin O'Connell is mentioned, actually, by the way. Now, Martin O'Connell, he never played in full back line. Martin O'Connell is a halfback. How he could be in the top 10 of fullbacks when he's a halfback on the team of the millennium. I haven't a clue in the God's model, but anyway, that's irrelevant.
He'll be in that vote as well, don't worry.
Yeah, but I will say this: John Okeefe would have been my fullback, the greatest of all time. But you know who would have been my cornerback? Would have been a Meath defender, and my cornerback would have been, and the best cornerback I ever saw in the game was Robbie O'Malley of Meath.
Really?
And not alone, because he was a very un-Meath-like defender. He was a really intelligent defender. Great positional sense. Very, very...
He wasn't dirty, so is what you're saying.
Oh, he wasn't. He was very much... we won't use that word, but... he was a very clean... He was a really clean... He was a brilliant cornerback. He played you fair and square. But I'll tell you this, as cornerbacks go, over the 40 years I've watched cornerbacks, he'd have to be included. He was superb.
Michael. Sorry. Michael.
You go on, Roy.
Sorry, I was just curious, just particularly because I know Michael does drift out into the midfield and then moves inside to the full forward. And I understand that in the modern game, because of the way defences are set up, it's pointless planting you once. Many people would say, "Oh, Michael Murphy should stay inside the edge of the square and try and put the frighteners on a full back line where he can cause a bit of damage." But if there's a swamp of players surrounding you, that doesn't make a huge pile of difference. But I'm just curious, particularly with the 2012 All-Ireland final, the first obviously 10 minutes, and targeting a perceived weakness in a full back line. Is that harder to do in a modern game because of the numbers game that's employed with a lot of the modern coaching?
I suppose to go back to that, I think we're developing. There's more and more 1v1s and duels developing, I feel, over the last year, 2 years. I think maybe possibly going forward. Like if you look at, I suppose, the the evolution of this thing. I remember roughly coming on to undergraduate scene in around the mid-2000s. And it was very much, it came on the full forward line. It was very much foot races. Balls was kicked in. You were a foot race with your full back. If you won it, there's a good chance you're going to take your man on and try and get a score. That evolved into the blanket defence, where probably teams picked out 2 of their best man markers and said, right, you're going to live in this man's pockets. And the rest of the 12 players, you're just going to mark zonally. So whoever comes into your spot, go and mark him for a few seconds and roll away. Whereas now I think the game has evolved over the last 2 years where teams are actually giving their player to mark and they're being asked to go and man mark again. Okay, and to allude in there, to bring up one of the points that Pat says, a lot of us are now alien to that. We've been, detrained out of that over the last number of years, and we still only have our 2 to 3 man markers, and the rest of us are trying to gain those skills. So it is a bit different in that way. But to go back to your point in terms of maybe to try and isolate and pinpoint things as a forward unit, I do believe that has been reintroduced into the game again, and I do believe we are seeing more and more of that again. You see things like potentially what teams are trying to do at the moment, of because maybe some of the teams around only have 2 to 3 really, really good man markers, they try and isolate them by dragging them out the field and bringing, I suppose, some of their lesser markers in towards goal. And you can see Dublin doing that quite a bit of the time. Kieran Kilkenny had huge success this year doing it, where he drifted inside, took maybe a man that was maybe really, really a good legs to mark him out the field, brought him inside to try and isolate him closer to goal. You know.
That I suppose that's kind of interesting thing there. You were talking about Pat, about John Okeefe, a physical specimen. The way the game has gone now, you can see someone, you can see Philly McMahon play full back, nominally that's his position for Dublin. He's not a big man. The idea of needing to be 6'2", 6'3", and planted on the edge of the square, that day is gone. Pat, do you think it can come back? Is there any need for it, or is the game gone beyond that?
Well, actually, just going on to the top 10, it's most unusual that in the top 10, there's actually no Dublin player in the top 10 of the list. No. Is that correct, Mikey?
Johnny
no Dublin player.
12, I think.
That's amazing. No, the second thing which stands out to me from the top 10 is really the absence of Ulster players. I mean, Tony Scullion, great black. Tony Scullion is in at 7, and Neil Mckee at 10. But you look at, when you think of the Tyrone team and you look, you'd be surprised that I would have said Ryan McMiniman.
Number 13, I think.
Oh, that's amazing. Conor Gormley, Tyrone Armagh, the McNultys. Jeez.
Sean Marty Lockhart was close too.
What about your pal Francie Bellew, Pat?
There's an archetype.
I think he lacked a bit of pace. Did I mention something about that? Actually, I was just thinking about it the other day. I had to write an article about Tyrone Armagh, and when you write an article about Tyrone Armagh, it comes with a health warning, because you really are skating on thin ice, because when they hate you with a passion. But I do remember that All-Ireland final. It was the only time my wife came to the game with me, and I was working with RTÉ obviously, and Armagh won, and she waited for me for an hour, and she met Michael List, and she said, "Where's Pat?" He says, "He's coming shortly." I was getting a guard the escort. I had 6 guards, 3 on either side, and they had to clear a channel to get me across the road where the hotel is now to get to my car, because there was a baying mob of a couple of hundred trying to kill me. She never came to a game with me again. I don't know why that. It was a bit scary now. But Francie, I'll tell you this. I mean, Francie was good player. He was. I look, to this day, I will still say it was when you look at All Ireland's left behind by Kerry, that was one of them. Yeah,
Kieran McKeever was another man who wasn't even nominated. Now he is in. He will be in for a halfback position, but I think Joe Brawley was one person to comment that he was the best fullback he ever saw play. So you probably wouldn't agree with that sentiment either, would you?
No, I wouldn't. No. Those Derry Armagh Tyrone, they had some great defenders, really good defenders, really, really good defenders. So that's why I said I'm very surprised. I was off the top of my head, and I was looking, because I see 3 eras here, there's 3 different, and like I would have said in the first era, the Robbie O'Malley, the John Okeefe, Johnny McCavill was a great fullback. maybe in the second era was the Mark O'Shea's, the Seamus Minehans, the Ricey McMinimans, and this era then you're talking about the Neil McGee's and the Johnny Coopers and the Mick Fitzsimons. Mick Fitzsimons is one of those fellas who you'd say he'll never make an inter-county player, but when it comes to man marking jobs, he's as good as it gets.
Yeah, he probably is. Have you had the pleasure there, Michael, actually? Mick Fitzsimons, would he be up there?
Pleasure, I don't know if you call. Rory O'Carroll is actually a very, very interesting one, I think. You know, I would have been the same age of him, played against him, I suppose, coming up through the age groups, and he presented a really, really different challenge to me at a stage where he took the marking from in front to a whole new level. And you were standing in the square, you were standing at the edge of the square, and your team were attacking with the ball, and it was taking up a position 5 to 10 yards in front of you, maybe between the 13 and the 21, and you're like, what's he doing? Like, is your teammate seeing that where he's marking? And all of a sudden, a ball would come in, drop short. He would take it, run up the field, and next thing, the second ball would come in, it would drop short. He would take it nicely on his chest, run up the field, and the third time you're thinking to yourself, I need to keep staying here, because I mean, one ball over the top and it's a goal all day long. But just the ability of your opposition, he hedged his bets a lot. He was really, really smart. As the attackers were coming closer up the field, he would get closer to you, but he was really, really good insofar as presenting you with another challenge that wasn't, I suppose, that, you know, stereotypical man-to-man approach. He marked from really, really good in front, and he had a really, really good brain. But likewise, you were staying patient all the time. Before you knew it, you were looking at your watch. There was 10 minutes to go in the game, and you might not touch the ball, you know.
So there's mind games involved there as well, isn't it? Because he's taking a gamble that, you know, he knows one ball over his head, and he looks like an idiot.
But it was calculated, like it was a calculated gamble. He was reacting to what was there. He knew potentially in our team that maybe we weren't a long ball type of team, or we maybe didn't have the ability to kick the ball nice and accurately over on a looped pass over his head. So yes, he hedged his bets, but it was always very, very calculated. So I mean, he was really, really just developing into really as really, really good years, and who knows, he's back in around the Dublin scene. He could really, really come again to bring something again to Dublin, you know.
Yeah, and Michael, in relation to, we'll say, the Donegal full back line, and particularly Neil McGee, like there would have been accusations thrown around there quite a bit. We'll say certainly when you were playing a much more defensive style, that it was easy to play in the full back line in Donegal because they had so much cover. But we have seen in the last couple of years, as you know, as your game plan evolved, particularly under Declan Bonner, or maybe a little bit more adventurous, etc., that he has been sort of, we'll say, isolated in one-on-one situations, like with Conor McManus, and he's well able to cope in a 1v1 situation. So would you think that criticisms would be fair, or what would your interpretation of that be?
He's answered them, like, and I suppose from Mark and Neil again through those three different eras, you know, that era that I described maybe before the blanket defence, during the blanket defence, and now coming out the far side of it. As we went back to the very, very start of this conversation, the great players are able to play in any of the areas, and he definitely is one of them. I mark him every night at training, and the one thing that they're able to do is they're able to adapt. If they're marking a stereotypically big full forward, they'll mark him in a certain way. They won't use the exact same tactics if they're marking a smaller corner forward. So, for example, if they're marking maybe a bigger corner forward, they'll try and maybe, as I say, they won't get physical with them. They'll try and mark them in front. If they're marking a smaller corner forward, they'll get physical and try and clamp them down. Neil was definitely one of them. And likewise, he's adapted his game. He's realised he needed to be a bit more, probably more comfortable in the ball over the recent years. And as I say, he's a really, really good footballer into the bargain. And you know, as I say, he has that hateful streak, that aggressive streak that you want.
But you need that. You need it.
You need it, surely. You need a stereotypical mind that you're going out here to, I suppose, limit your player from touching the ball. You're going to war. However, the demands now on that player from management, from tactics, from coaches now is much more than that. Like it once was, you go out, you stop your man taking the ball. I don't care if you don't take the ball, that's grand. Whereas now, you need to be able to take short kick outs. You need to be able to, like Philly McMahon against Colin Cooper a number of years ago in the All-Ireland final, do we remember?
Yeah, scored him, yeah.
But like, he actually didn't mark him. He actually ran up the field, and it was a man-to-man approach. Colin Cooper was running after him, you know. So they're getting really, really smart with tactics, with everything, and they're able to evolve. That's the big one. They're open to evolve, and they have the skill set to evolve, and that's the big one of the really, really good ones.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons, I'm just going to share a screen again here. One of the reasons they get they've had to develop their tactics, I suppose, is the fact that the game isn't the same. I suppose there's the rules are stricter, and they're probably policed a little bit more.
Classic.
Mick Lyons and Colin O'Neill, and the referee's reaction here is
this was the best one.
Oh, sorry, replay, go again.
Did he?
The ref slipping is classic. Oh, did he?
Sorry, now that's the shorter. And the hardness.
Were you playing that day, Pat?
I was, of course. Yeah. I was very lucky, Rory, that I played in my first 10 months to finals. I think we won them all against Cork. Now that I come to think of it, but that day we got away with more. But look, Paddy used to mark me in training every night. So for 10 years he marked me, and if you could overcome Paddy, you were in form. But the only doomsday scenario, if you did get past him once and rattle a score, the next time you can be certain and sure you were going to
get a belt.
But he was out. I mean, and we talk about backs, and we talk about players, and we talk about the full back line, and about intelligence and being versatile and being comfortable on the ball. But as something Michael alluded to, you have to have a bit of, for want of a better word, badness or cutting. You must be, I like the likes of I used to like Ricey McMiniman. I like Johnny Cooper. There's a bit of cutting. That's not in the Kerry players, the Kerry defenders at the moment. They're nice defenders. Nice defenders. You can take 3 or 4 nice defenders, but you need 1 or 2 bad boys, for want of a better word. And Paddy was that fella. I mean, Paddy was the guy, was the warrior in our team. Paddy was the guy who brought that little extra edge to the team. He was just like, I mean, look, we know, Rory, you could fill the whole program with stories about Paddy. I mean, I like you'd share the dressing room, and
I'll tell you one quick one, Pat. And because I think this is kind of will always sum him up for me, and it's one of the most distinct memories I had. And of course, you'll say, "Here we go again," back to Cork. But it was the night of the 2010 All Ireland final. Cork had beaten down, and we were all down in the Burlough. And I'd say it was around 10:30, 11 o'clock, and all the ex-Cork players were there: Tony Davis, Niall Callahan, Stephen O'Brien, all those lads. They were all there. Yeah. It was like It was like finally the torch has been passed, and Paddy arrived in, and I'm not joking you, Pat. Now this is like Cork's big night. And he walked in, and it was like the parting of the Red Sea. On either side, there was the adulation that he had. And, it was just incredible, and people were so happy to see him, and he was telling stories, and it was just brilliant,
Oh, he was a legend. I mean, he'd have a routine in the dressing room before the All-Ireland final, and it was like the routine of a madman. He'd be buck naked. He'd be buck naked now on the floor, and he'd be hopping up and down, and he'd have the ball, and he'd be so not as much as a screed of an underpants or anything. He'd be up and down, and he'd be jumping and hopping, and he'd shoulder you, and he'd shoulder everything. So by the time we'd all get it, we'd be all manic by the time we'd get out to the dressing room. Sunday, the night before, we'd stay in Malahide. Oh, Jesus, he'd be outside in the corridor. And if he couldn't have a ball, it was a pillow. So he'd be throwing the pillow and catching the pillow, shouldering the right wall, shouldering the left wall. I mean, if you couldn't be inspired by that, you couldn't be. He was just brilliant. Although the boys just obviously, I mean, he was very hurt when Kerry got rid of him, and Mark and Tomas were playing with Kerry then, and Mark and Tomas said they'd come back to the bar, Paddy be cross because after they'd have played Tipperary in the Munster semi-final, and Paddy wouldn't mention anything at all about the game, and eventually, Paddy, you never asked anything about the game today. He says, in our day, he says, we used to be Tipperary over the phone.
Michael, We'll probably finish up shortly enough, Michael. I'm wondering if you could give us who would you see as the three best inside defenders playing in the game today
at the moment.
Yeah.
But I suppose you have to look towards, again, I start with Dublin, and I look at Johnny Cooper immediately as one right there. I still think that Neil Mckee from where we are, from our point of view, is still there and at it. And then you look at the way it's essentially evolved, and as there three full forwards playing on the inside line at the moment. Can you play a 2, 3, and 4 on a 13, 14, and 15, or are you looking at maybe that withdrawn type of player? And that third one definitely is really, really open to a much more half-back type of player. So I keep mine to 2. I know that's maybe hedging my bets a little, but that's stereotypical where I see it.
Yeah, and yourself, who would you see as the
well,
best?
I said I'll divide the team into 3 eras. In the modern era, at the moment, my full back line, I would have Johnny Cooper, Neil Mckee, and actually, Rory might remember, the last night we did the Sunday game was round 4 of the league. And there was a piece we highlighted, was the man-to-man defending of Neil Mckee that day on Conor McManus. It was absolutely superb.
That's correct, yeah.
So I'd have Mick Fitzsimon, Neil Mckee, and a fellow we haven't mentioned, and over the last 10 years, in my opinion, the most consistent cornerback, Keith Higgins and Mayo. That's my full back line from the modern era. From my full back line from the noughties would be cornerback Mark O'Shea, full back Seamus Moynihan, and left cornerback Ryan McMillan. Just to briefly finish up, the full back line from the 70s, early 80s, what would be my full back line? Robbie O'Malley, I've mentioned already. Robbie O'Malley would be on my greatest full back line of the 40 years. At full back, John Okeefe, and John Okeefe would be on my greatest full back team for the last 40 years. The other cornerback was Jimmy Deanan, best man marker that Kerry had. And I can tell you this, in 1982, if Jimmy was got injured in July, broke his leg, if Jimmy was playing in 1982, I can rest assured that Seamus Darby wouldn't be calling in there for a handy goal. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I'll say this, just the final, 2 things. My team, I would have Robbie O'Malley, I would have John Okeefe. The other cornerback position, it's very hard to decide between Seamus Moynihan and Mark O'Shea. But because it's a cornerback position, I would absolutely have Mark O'Shea as one of the best cornerbacks.
Okay, right.
But I would have Paddy next week in the half-back line just to match.
I know. Look, as much as the All-Stars every year are an imperfect science, this vote of ours, which is based on the All-Stars, is also a little bit of an imperfect science. But it gives us something to talk about, and that's good at this time. So, listen, before we go, Rory, you've some news from another one of our...
Yeah, thanks, Mikey. I just wanted to wish Tomas, O'Shea and Orla a sincere congratulations. They had a beautiful baby girl, all healthy, I think, from what I can gather, 9 pounds, which is, a fine size of a baby, as they would say in the snapper. Aoife, I think, Aoife, I think they've called her, and fantastic news, we'll say. In a fairly bleak time, it's great great news for him, and congratulations to them both, and well done to Orla.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to us.
Yeah, just like to say congratulations as well, and just remind everybody that there is plenty of GA content on the RTÉ website and the News Now app. Sunday Sport will return again 2 to 4 this weekend, and we will also have tonight 9:30 p.m. on RTÉ2. Rory, am I correct?
That's correct.
Hurling final.
95.
All right, so we are cranking up our GA content for you to keep us all happy in these tough times. But I would now like to say goodbye and say thank you to Pat, to Michael, and to Rory, and we'll chat to you again next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.